We're live.
Lovely. Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. We are starting our next session of Roadmap for a Moral Society. Hopefully, all of you have been staying on these sessions. We've moved on from one collection of quotes. Now we are on some answered questions of Abdu'l-Baha. We thank Mr. Gilbert Hakim for putting together these beautiful slides where we're going over the selected topics from some answered questions of Abdu'l-Baha. Today's topic is spiritual proofs of the originality of man. Once more, spiritual proofs of the originality of man. This topic is a pretty unique view compared to a lot of other theological items that you may have seen elsewhere. Baha'u'llah has introduced very, very, very groundbreaking and unique spiritual concepts and really scientific realities that we also can find if we also look for it. So, with that being said, again, we have been going through over 100 sessions. You can find all of these sessions online right now at Clearwater Baha'is on YouTube, also the Facebook page for the Baha'i Center of Clearwater. If you've liked the video so far and you're having trouble finding them, just go to clearwaterbaha'is.org, clearwaterbaha'is.org, scrolling down on the homepage, looking at the menu up top, you'll see under activities and events, this session for joining Zoom, should you so desire. With that said, we normally start these sessions with a beautiful prayer. Now, one of our attendees volunteers to start with a prayer. It sets the tone, a spiritual mood that we are trying to have with one another as we are searching for truth. Having this purity of heart is extremely important. And I believe we have someone unmuting. Was that you, Armin?
Yes, I can start.
Lovely.
Praised and glorified art thou, O God. Grant that the day of attaining thy holy presence may be fast approaching. Cheer our hearts through the potency of thy love and good pleasure, and bestow upon us steadfastness that we may willingly submit to thy will and thy decree. Verily, thy knowledge embraceth all things thou hast created or will create, and thy celestial might transcendent whatsoever thou hast called or will call into being. There is none to be worshipped but thee. There is none to be desired except thee. There is none to be adored beside thee. And there is not to be loved save thy good pleasure. Verily, thou art the supreme ruler, the sovereign truth, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Oh.
Thank you very much. We're going to open up a new session about spiritual proofs of the originality of man. We went through logical proof of the originality of man on previous sessions. Now, just to remind ourselves, the building blocks of life, which is DNA, is common, and from trees to animals to humans, these are the four building blocks: the cytosine, thymine, adenine, and guanine. So these are really four building blocks, and they're connected through a phosphate ribbon, basically. Now, permutation of these and combination of these four elements, which are actually a compound, is a carbon-based compound, no life in them. When you put them together and the combination of environment occurs, suddenly it creates life. And we see that permutation of these four base building blocks can be infinite, but you don't see any incomplete animal or plant. They're self-sustaining. That means when they get created, if and when they get created as a complete species or plant. So you see, there is no in between or accidental permutation of these four building blocks. So this is what we really referred to last session, related to basically building blocks of life and how humans are different as a species and didn't come from basically progression of another animal. Although the permutation of gene may have impacted offspring of an animal to become human, which this is what they call it, missing link generally. But when the human was born, it was born as a complete species. And it wasn't permutated to become a human. So there was no time that there was a half a human, generally. So now, as we went through that process of explaining it through Abdu'l-Baha's writings, now we're going to go to the spiritual proof of existence of man. So we need a volunteer to read.
The arguments we have adduced thus far, the originality of the human species, have been rational ones. Now we will provide spiritual arguments, which are indeed the fundamental ones. For we establish the existence of God through rational arguments, and it was likewise established through rational arguments that man has been man from his very inception and origin, and that the essence of his species has existed from eternity. We will now present spiritual proofs that human existence, that is, the human species, is a necessary existence, and that without man, the perfection of divinity would not shine forth. But these are spiritual and not rational arguments.
Okay, so it's again, here is referred to again all the discussions in those tablets that we read related to existence of man and completeness of the species, and is not derivative of another species in general. So this permutation of these four building blocks, if and when occurs anywhere in the universe, man would appear. So that was the argument that we had before. Now what we're trying to do is go to the spiritual side of the proof of the existence of humans. So here, for we established the existence of God through rational argument, and it was likewise established through rational arguments that man has been man from his very inception and origin. So the species that started to upright, which we quantify that as the start of the human species, has been around for 3.2 million years. But it has been always a man.
So
this is
to ask this question, if you may get to the point of the beginning of going upright, for example, as the what we know to be human beings today, for the sake of this conversation being brief. Before that, were they man or another animal?
no man existed before that. At least we haven't found one.
So what we read from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, it seems to say, as I understand it, that man has always existed so long as God has.
Right, but that's existence in man relates to the soul of a man or a spirit of a man, not his physical body. The seed of the spirit of man is always existed in the spiritual world.
So so the concept of creation being perfect and imperfect, man being in creation, creation is perfect. Man not being in creation, creation is imperfect. That was at least what we read over the previous weeks. So this concept of imperfect creation existed before the body of man existed.
Well, we're now exploring that right now through this writing related to the spiritual proof of the existence of man.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are
but
you talking
my
about time? Are you talking about time restrictions? I mean, the universe has existed for 14 billion years. This Earth has only existed for 4
Yeah,
billion years.
that's as far as we can measure, but this doesn't mean that that's the reality of
Well, I
existence.
mean, Abdu'l-Baha says the universe has always existed. So if 14
Okay.
billion years was measured as we've measured it, Abdu'l-Baha has claimed that the universe has always existed. So
Yeah, these are different dimensions. Remember, what we're
Right.
discussing here is a visible universe. Doesn't mean that this is limited to this dimension.
okay, so in this dimension only, and not speaking up to the spirit of man, speaking to what maybe an atheist would call the organism known as Homo sapien, and whatever uh, we want to give as an embellishment for humanity as we know it. We know that adaptation is a reality, that genes change as they are ordered and people look differently, just as animals, as we would go to the origin of species and Charles Darwin looking at the Galapagos Islands, finches, those birds having different beaks and different structures, but depending on where they are and what they specialized in for their eating or mating habits. Humanity also has changed. We know that over time humanity has diversity.
Correct. That's the question that we're trying to address, whether the species, when it occurred on Earth, was a human, not variation of an animal that accumulated or expanded ability of cognitive capabilities.
So if we were to go back to the primordial ooze of Earth, where we have the single-celled organisms, and we have the emergence of multicellular organisms, and really a bunch of organisms in the water. That's as we understand it, at least. One of those single-celled organisms was a human being from the very beginning.
No,
So
that's not a human being. That is a single cell species that was created when the water, as well as the heat and the chemicals that we discussed, those four building blocks, got
Right.
together and created a single cell species, basically, or animal.
And that's basically your soul of that species, whatever it was. It had a soul made up of those four building blocks, as I understand it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the question. Remember, those building blocks are chemicals. This is not a living being.
Right.
These are actually carbon-based chemicals that got mixed together and created a single cell. But human didn't exist at that time.
yeah,
Well,
so you had
somebody
amino
recreate.
acids, you had amino
Sorry?
acids, you had amino acids and other chemicals,
Correct.
molecules, where you have an association of chemicals to form molecules coming together, creating an organism. Understood. Now, going forward in time, at some point, there was an animal that was born that looked like
No,
us. Is that what we're saying?
no.
No, that's not.
The question is that you may have this human species may have been derived from, first of all, it's a mammals. Mammal didn't exist during the time that water was covered, the earth was covered by water. Slowly, the mammal occurred on Earth. And then obviously when the meteorite hit the Earth, all the the big animals disappeared and the mammal took over the Earth. And that's what happened. Now the question is very simple. When a permutation of those elements occurs, the offspring of a mammal, like let's say monkeys, would get created when that combination occurs. So the offspring would be a human, but the person it came from was an animal. This is a different concept.
Okay, so the idea of an emergence of a human being, or whatever our species would be called at that time, the emergence of man from the animal parent.
Correct.
But that means that means the same thing that everyone in science has been saying, that there is a link at some point.
No, it's not. That's the whole problem. You see, that's the missing link. You see, if you had that, you would have seen a gradual, basically morphing of the animal to a human. But that doesn't exist. That
So-
link doesn't exist.
So
what
that's
Abdu'l-Baha said.
understood. That's understood in this concept, but it's hard for people to generally understand that an animal will beget a human, that the parent wasn't the same species. That's very difficult for a lot of people to understand.
Well,
that,
that's called missing link. That's the problem. We haven't been able to solve this problem in terms of seeing that the DNA of, for example, a monkey would turn into a DNA of human.
we would say more primates, because monkeys, they're
Yeah,
not like
primates in
chimpanzees.
general, of course.
Because chimpanzees and orangutans are actually more similar to us than monkeys would be, like
Oh, no,
tamarins.
of course. Yeah.
There was a banana.
A banana.
Yeah. Anyways, the whole point is that, again, whenever the permutation of these four building block occurs in a sequence, a new species occurs.
And these
It
building
may
blocks
occur
are
from, sorry?
these you're saying four building blocks, as in
Of life,
the
of life.
nucleotides?
Yeah, those that we just looked at.
Right.
Okay.
There was an experiment that was done years ago where they took these four chemicals and all that, and they added electricity. And some people have theorized that it was a bolt of lightning that transformed these chemicals into amino acids. I don't know if you remember reading about that.
Now remember, these things occurred during the volcanic eruption under the water, which these chemicals got together and created that amino acid.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we just wrapped that up, and here again, so for we established the existence of God through rational argument, and it was likewise established through rational argument that man has been man for his very inception and origin. That means when it was formed, it wasn't an animal, it was a man. That means it had a soul. The animal doesn't have a soul.
Right. You know, this is when Gilbert, when I say, you say, oh God, you know, we were created in his image. Baha'u'llah says we don't know his essence. It's the same thing. When those four base structures came together, that was basically God's image. His essence we don't know. And then because we can call it then sort of a soul, four elements cohesion, that then from there on forward always was only destined to become men. No, not ever a monkey.
Yeah, if you have to read this very carefully, then you get the message. He says, and that the essence of his species has existed from eternity, not his physical being. That means the seed of the soul of a man existed, seed of the soul of a man in the spiritual world.
The hand sometimes called that the sea of consciousness. I always thought that was Mr. Sears. He talked a lot about that. and not meaning that we had pre-existence, but meaning in its perpetual structure. The seed of consciousness always had those four elements in our soul attached, and when the time was right, it was impregnated into the womb.
Correct. So here again, so here's and that the essence of his species has existed from eternity. The same way that the solar manifestation is ancient and always existed. So now we will now present spiritual proof that human existence, that is the human species, is a necessary existence, and that without man, the perfection of divinity would not shine forth. But these are spiritual and not rational arguments. So what does it mean? It means that creator without creation is impossible. Creation without a consciousness is impossible. Because if at that point that consciousness of humanity didn't exist, essence of it, not physical body, then the creation would be incomplete, because there would be no one that would recognize God. If that was the case, then creation had no purpose, because the creator wouldn't be known. So we're going to read more and it's become clearer. Okay, any comment, questions?
Not yet.
I think as you unfold it, it'll make more sense.
We have established time and again through proofs and arguments that man is the noblest of all beings and the sum of all perfections. Indeed, all existing things are the seat of the revelation of the divine splendors. That is, the signs of the divinity of God are manifest in the realities of all things, just as the earth is the place where the rays of the sun are reflected, meaning that the light, heat, and influence of the sun are plain and manifest in all the atoms of the earth. So too does each one of the atoms of the universe of this infinite space proclaim one of the perfections of God. Nothing is deprived of this. Each is either a sign of the mercy of God, or of his power, or his greatness, or his justice, or his sustaining providence, or his generosity, or his sight, or his hearing, or his knowledge, or his grace, and so on.
All right, so proof and argument of the existence of man is the noblest and of all being and sum of all perfection. So obviously, the cognitive power that the man has can harness the power of the earth. All the physical attributes of the earth has been enslaved by cognitive capabilities of man. So indeed, all existing things are the seat of the revelation of divine splendor. That means there was a creator that created all these elements, which are linked to be consumed by humanity. So again, that is, the signs of divinity of God are manifest in the realities of all things. So when you put four building blocks together and suddenly life gets created, is the power and the divine splendor and divinity of God, an ability to create human beings that have consciousness. Just as the earth is the place where the rays of the sun are reflected, so here again you see, if sun didn't exist, earth wouldn't exist. No species would exist on it. So those rays of the sun with the chemical that existed on Earth created this environment that man would be visible, become reality. Physical man becomes reality. So meaning that the light, heat, and the influence of the sun are plain and manifest in all atoms of the earth. So any growth that you see on earth is reflection of the sun. So too does each one of the atoms of the universe in this infinite space proclaim one of the perfections of God. So all these chemicals, interactions, birth and destruction that occurs throughout the universe is the sign of power of the creation. Nothing is deprived of this. So all follow the same discipline, the same laws. Each is either a sign of the mercy of God or of his power or his greatness or his justice or his sustaining providence or his generosity or his sight or his hearing or his knowledge. So imagining somebody would created this in an environment that life would become manifest on earth and consciousness of humanity can recognize God. Of course, true manifestations of God, which are the messengers that bring in the Holy Spirit, writings of the manifestation to us. Something is very, very important from that perspective, that this process that we were discussing here related to spiritual proof and power of creation, which without the creator, creation cannot exist. And we know through thermodynamics, nothing is added or subtracted from this universe that is created. Nothing. So everything is contained within the same sphere of the matter that we see around the universe. Interestingly, a few weeks ago, they discovered through Hubble telescope that there are other universes. So before we thought those are galaxies. Now they found out, because now with Hubble telescope, they can see much farther than they did before. Because we could see edge of the universe before. Now they have surpassed that, and now this Big Bang theory is in doubt. So how did these universes occurred, and when did those universes occur? As we discussed these few sessions before, that even half of the astrophysicists believe that there are multiverse. That means there are many universes. Now the telescope, the Hubble telescope, has shown that there are other universes.
I've got the picture. I've looked at it. What you're talking about, Gilbert, not too long ago. It's unbelievable when you see that new expansion of our understanding of the multiple universes. Amazing pictures.
Yeah. Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about it extensively, and so did Michio Kaku, discussed about, which I thought was rather interesting.
Well,
But
I always like to think when Carl says we are just made up of stardust. I think that says it all.
that's Carl Sagan.
Yes, that's what I said, Carl Sagan.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear that.
But
Yeah.
just a piece here though. Universe, it's think of it as where the word comes from. Verse is, say, a sentence. Unit is one, right? One verse. So this physical reality that we're in, is one universe. The idea of parts of the universe being created and destroyed, Abdu'l-Baha also even talks about that in his writings. We actually can find that in the Baha'i writings from Abdu'l-Baha. He actually speaks directly to that point. I mean, this is before tectonic theory, as we know it today, was even acceptable to scientists. Tectonic theory is the idea that parts of the Earth are consumed back within it through these trenches or subduction zones, and then you have these rifts, these ridges, like the mid-Atlantic ridge, that you've got lava coming up and Atlantic Ocean's growing, for example. You have these areas where the Earth is growing on the surface, so to speak, and the other parts where it's not, it's actually shrinking. Same thing with the universe. Parts of the universe are destroyed, so to speak, or recycled, if you will, while other parts are just newly being created. And the idea of the universe being infinite, as Abdu'l-Baha terms it, would mean that there is no boundary to the universe. Maybe physical matter will have pockets that you'll have more of it, and dark matter just meaning matter that you cannot see with light because it's in the dark. Matter that's in the dark matter, literally that. You have also a lot of unknown mass that's in the universe that we just don't know about. So I think it would be presumptuous where we haven't observed the universe. We've only observed the parts that we're in, and we are still debating whether it's expanding or contracting. I think it's valuable to look at what Abdu'l-Baha has provided us, that the universe has had no beginning. It's infinite and has no end. So it's hard to conceptualize other than the infinity symbol, the idea of infinity, because our finite minds are just so, the word finite. So I just think a good idea to look at all these scientists that are trying to discover our reality with a sense of hope, but at the same time, I don't think that one way or another, until we actually, in an empiricism, in the empirical sense, we see it with our own eyes. I don't think it's something that we should, as my personal opinion, believe in. So the idea of a multiverse, I mean, we can go talk about the idea of it, but the fact is we haven't even seen our own universe, and there's still, even in scientific debate, the ideas of how the universe was formed, is it expanding or contracting? These are things we're talking about today. We haven't even observed the observable universe. So having said that, I think that it's a good idea, going back to this idea of us as human beings. We also were not there to see the first human being arise, hence the word missing link, right? That's the nice title. It's missing because we're not going to be able to find it. Not today, at least. So I want to go back to this concept of the soul, if we could. There was a mention that the human soul, and that other beings, namely animals, don't have souls. My understanding is no other being other than man has a human soul, but everything has a soul. The degree of functionality or fullness is very limited compared to our soul. Is that true, or is that wrong?
No, there is no soul. What they may have spirit, but spirit is different than soul in animals.
For a
When
lot
you
of
say,
people, a soul and a spirit are super interchangeable. Can you help us to find out what the difference is?
Yeah, for example, you say this horse is spirited. That means that the actions that is performing through pre-programmed environment, you see the effect of it in behavior of that animal. So they call this a spirited horse. Is the reflection of his being without a soul. It's programmed to do that. So that's basically an animal which doesn't have a soul, and his soul is not, his material being is not preserved.
So is it the same as
disappears.
when we are reflecting the attributes of God? When you're reflecting honesty, truthfulness, even the other attributes of God, power, speech, names, and so forth. All these very, very important, giant meaning words. I'm misusing my words now, but these very deep words that it's very hard to on its face for a person maybe to understand without sitting and thinking. But as human beings, we are also reflecting. And the difference is you're saying one is that we're training ourselves to learn these attributes and reflect them, and another is the environment and reflecting what the environment is. Is that correct?
No, there are there are differences. We should read this and we get to that point. But there are clear differences between animals and humans. When you're dealing with attributes of God, only exist in humans. For example, when you're looking at a dog that it says is the man's best friend, the reaction they have to a human being is a master and slave reaction, which is built into the evolution of their species. They don't do this because they find affinity to another head of the pack. They don't develop this. These are natural instincts that are built into their system. So they follow their instinct and they see humans as the head of the pack.
So what you're
And that's
saying,
how
what you're saying makes sense. That canines, specifically dogs in this case, they have this pack mentality where they have an alpha and they are, practically listening to the alpha. I understand that. My question, going back to this idea of reflecting the virtues of God in everything in creation. Us human beings, we're able to see the attributes of God in creation. We're able to, in all of creation, in some way, shape, or form, take a lesson from it for our own learning. There's even a hidden word about that every created thing, every atom in existence is created for us to learn. So my point, and I'm trying to understand, not trying to cause a misunderstanding, but just for the sake of more understanding, you're saying that uh, due to the construction and the history of getting to this point, that animals in their in their development didn't gain a soul, don't have a soul, and therefore what they're doing is stimulus based responses.
it's programmed. That's correct. So when you're dealing with, for example, compassion, there is no compassion in any animal. They follow their instincts, which is law of nature, that the strongest survives. Now, sometimes you see even species that even steal babies of another species and grow with them. But those are instinct, has nothing to do with love, compassion, of any of the characteristics that exist in humans. It's very difficult. Actually, I offended someone that was very she loved her dog, and and when I told her that that reaction that the dog has to her has nothing to do with love, so I offended her. But in reality is that those relationship that animals have to other animals or to humans, they don't see us as a superior being. They see us as their master.
Or food source.
Of course.
Because like I
Right.
mean, not to make it like going out further and further, but it made it easier for me to understand when I looked at reptilian creatures, snakes. No matter how much you feed them, how much you take care of them, if they don't get fed, they're going to eat you if they're big enough to do it.
Of course, of course. But anyways, these are reality of the laws of nature, that the strongest survives. This happens in lions when the chief lion basically with harems of lionesses becomes old. A young Turk lion comes and takes over the territory, and the laws of survival and progression follows. Even the intruding male lion goes and kills the cubs of the lionesses just to make sure that their gene would survive. So you see, there is no love. This is laws of survival. And of course, they evolved that way to protect their species. All right, we're diverging from the reality of man here. All right, any other comments so we can go to the next one?
Yes, just a very flippant comment. The law of survival inherent in nature is a really good learning process for us as a species with a dual nature, having both an animalistic nature and a spiritual reality. So looking at this and, you know, looking at the nature and the animal world, I think, is a very good wake-up call for us as human beings of, you know, having two components of our being. So you know, with the conversation that John just exposed and yours as well, I think the best thing I've gotten out of all this so far is that, good God, you know, where the world is looking very much like this. Yep. So just a comment. Thank you very much.
I have one comment. I've heard Abdu'l-Baha say that when man doesn't reflect those spiritual qualities, he becomes like lower than an animal. So that means that he becomes even lower than the degree of the animal, right?
That's it.
So generally, again, every human being is born pure and has both sides. You have the laws of progression and exist in terms of protecting the person himself or the spiritual side. So these both sides exist in every human being. Now, if you're deprived of the manifestation of God and the laws of Holy Spirit, which are laws that come from God, we would be mere animal because our instinct would take over and the strong would always win. And so this is the reality of the laws of nature. All right, let's someone read this one.
I'll go ahead and read. Our meaning is that every existing thing is of necessity the seat of the revelation of the divine splendors. That is, the perfections of God are manifest and revealed therein. It is even as the sun which shines upon the desert, the sea, the trees, the fruits, the blossoms, upon all earthly things. Now the world of existence, indeed, every created thing proclaims but one of the names of God. But the reality of men is an all-encompassing and universal reality, which is the seat of the revelation of all the divine perfections. That is a sign of each one of the names, attributes, and perfections that we ascribe to God exists in man. If such were not the case, he would be unable to imagine and comprehend these perfections. For example, we say that God is all-seeing. The eye is the sign of his sight. If this faculty were lacking in man, how could we imagine the sight of God? For one born blind cannot imagine what it is to see, any more than one born deaf can imagine what it is to hear, or the lifeless what is to be alive.
So here again, our meaning is that every existent thing is of necessity the seat of the revelation of divine splendor. That is, the perfections of God are manifested and revealed therein. So when you're looking at the universe or creation and reality of living beings or living things, you see that the perfection of those elements that are created, and this shows the power of the creator itself. So again, it manifests itself, it reflects basically the power of the creator of those entities that we see, whether it's universe as a whole, which is, we can't even measure it, which are billions and billions of light years apart. It would take, again, millions and millions of generations to even travel to the, which is not possible. We don't have any vehicle to even detect it. So you see that the vastness of the universe itself, and now we're dealing with multiverse, basically, multiple universes that exist, and this correlates to having multiple Big Bangs if there are multiple universes. So this issue regarding, and we were discussing this maybe a couple of years ago, they related to whether there was one Big Bang or this is a cyclical process, that there were multiple Big Bangs. Now with the discovery of other universes, this theory related to multiple Big Bang becomes a reality in general. So here we have, again, we see in destruction and creation and combination of these building blocks that creates life, the power that exists in it is unparalleled. Now the world of existence, indeed, every created thing proclaim but one of the names of God. But the reality of man is all encompassing and universal reality, which is the seat of the revelation of all divine perfection. So what is it that we're experiencing from a spiritual perspective? Those are attributes of God. Now, if we couldn't detect that attribute within ourselves or exercise that, how would we know that that attribute even existed in its completeness or its in infinite capacity? And that's where the attributes of God, we cannot tell the essence of God, of how it's made. What we can tell is the attribute that is innate in every human being in a form that is detectable by us. So combination of unlimited degree of those attributes is assigned to the creator. So here again is, if we didn't, for example, know about forgiveness, for example, how would we even detect that that particular attribute exists in God? So similarly, sir, if everybody is blind, no one can even imagine how you can see, how you can detect something, or someone that is deaf. How would this person experience vibration of inner ears to hear sound, for example? So this key element is that those attributes that we see manifest through soul of a human being, and we can write about it and discuss those, assigning it in an infinite form to the creator himself. So that's really the key. So here it says reality of man is an all-encompassing and universal reality, which is the seat of the revelation of all the divine perfection. So those perfections that we see, and that's why they say God is make man in his own image. That means that any detectable attribute of God is within us. And that's how we can, although without knowing his essence, we know he exists because of his creation. And of course, through his messengers, which are manifestations of God that mirror attributes of God himself. They don't have will of their own, they exercise will of God. So all those, especially the latest manifestation, which all the writings are authenticated and is 100% word of God that we're reading in the holy text that we have received. Any comments on this?
Yes, Gilbert, just looking at the quote so far, first of all, we were looking at nature, and I think it's a very good learning lesson because in reality, when we look at nature and primitive man, we can also form the equation, obviously, because we are dual beings, both with soul and body. So we could say that also our consciousness and our gaining of more understanding of the attributes of God within ourselves is a process of spiritual evolution. And you could look at both the physical world and the spiritual world, and by that, the aid of looking at the natural world, so to speak, we could say that we are, as spiritual beings, in a very long, drawn-out process of evolution, spiritual evolution, and we have, because we have needed to develop, one of the essential things we've required is spiritual educators. So looking at nature and looking at our reality is an evolutionary process, is my point. Thank you.
So here, okay. So we need someone to read this.
Yeah. I think we already read this one. I'm sorry.
Oh, we did? Okay. Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. Divinity of God. Thus, the divinity of God, which is the totality of all perfections, reveals itself in the reality of man. That is, the divine essence is the sum total of all perfections, and from this station it casts a ray of its splendor upon the human reality. In other words, the Sun of Truth is reflected in this mirror. Thus, man is a perfect mirror facing the Sun of Truth, and is the seat of its reflection. The splendor of all the divine perfections is manifest in the reality of man, and it is for this reason that he is the vicegerent, a person exercising delegated power, and apostle of God. If man did not exist, the universe would be without result. For the purpose of existence is the revelation of divine perfections. We cannot say, then, that there was a time when man was not. At most, we can say that there was a time when this earth did not exist, and that at the beginning, man was not present upon it.
All right. So here again, divinity of God, which is how do we define attributes of God, is divinity. We see for its, which is the totality of all perfections. So all those attributes that we see in a perfect degree was assigned to God. So here it says reveals itself, the way it shows, it manifests through the reality of man. That you see men, especially manifestations of God that reflect those attributes. The divine essence is the sum of total of all perfection, and from this station it casts a ray of the splendor upon the human reality. So here again, we don't know what the essence of God is, but we can see the Spirit of God, which is the sum of the total perfections. And this is what true manifestation is communicated as an example of the execution of the Word of God. In other words, the Sun of Truth is reflected in this mirror. So, manifestation of God is the one that is reflecting those attributes. Now, the splendor of all divine perfection is manifest in the reality of man. And it is for this reason that he is the vicegerent, which is a person exercising delegated power. So here you see that the Son of Truth, here I think it's reflective of the manifestation of God. And apostle of God. So the example is given to us, and attributes of those perfections is displayed, and for the first time in the history of the man, life of manifestation and the actions and blueprint of the behavior of the manifestation of God during his ministry is recorded, and the reactions shows the benevolence, forgiveness, love, and all the attributes that is innate in every human being. In its perfection, we can correlate it to the manifestation of God, which is pure reflection of the attributes of God. So if man did not exist, the universe would be without result, for the purpose of existence is the revelation of the divine perfection. So how do we reveal, how does God reveal the perfection that exists? If man didn't exist, nobody would recognize the existence of God. So you couldn't call him a creator if no one could detect that he existed, right? So this is, again, so purpose of existence is revelation of the divine perfection. We cannot say then that there was a time when man was not. At most, we can say that there was a time when this earth did not exist, or man didn't exist on earth, and that at the beginning man was not present upon it. So when the earth occurred and man wasn't created upon it, but the seed of the spirit or soul of a man existed in the spiritual world, always existed.
That's it, Gilbert. You see, this is how, and I forget, a couple of years ago, I heard this explanation. It says soul always existed. You know, talk about the four building blocks, right? Soul always existed. And that there always was a manifestation, regardless whether whatever species we look like, animal kingdom, vegetable kingdom, regardless, because soul existed within those building blocks that were part of our soul, that a manifestation came to them and was able to reveal to them according to their reality where they were at that time. And then we evolved in our species where always a manifestation existed, regardless that image of God, meaning those non-material attributes of God within revelation always existed.
Great. Any other comments? If not, we're going to go to the next one.
Creator and creation have always existed. But from the beginning that has no beginning to the end that has no end, a perfect manifestation has always existed. This man of whom we speak here is not just any man. That which we intend is the perfect man. For the noblest part of the tree and the fundamental purpose of its existence is the fruit. A tree without fruit is of no use. Therefore, it cannot be imagined that the world of existence, whether in the realms above or below, was once populated by cows and donkeys, cats and mice, and yet was deprived of the presence of man. What a false and vacuous notion.
Right. So here again, we go back to the previous paragraphs. See, beginning has no beginning and end that has no end. So always this notion of the soul existed, whether it's a form of a seed of a soul in the spiritual world or soul of a manifestation, which here refers to, that is ancient. That means it existed before in its complete form. So this man of whom we speak here is not just a man. That which we intend is the perfect man. And who is the perfect man? Is the manifestation of God. So his soul existed before. For the noblest part of the tree, remember they're saying Bab and Baha'u'llah are branches of the tree of life. So it said, for the noblest part of the tree, which are manifestation and the fundamental purpose of its existence, is the fruit. So if those souls of the manifestation didn't exist, that tree of life would have no meaning if it doesn't have fruits. A tree without fruit is no use. Therefore, it cannot be imagined that the world of existence, whether in realms above or below, you see? So that soul of a manifestation existed in the realm above all the time. Was once populated by only animals. All right, any other comments? Not, we're gonna go to the next one.
I can read.
Go ahead.
The word of God is as clear as the sun. This is a spiritual argument, but it cannot be presented to the material philosophers at the onset. Rather, we must first present the rational arguments and only afterwards the spiritual ones.
So here again, it's convincing people, and this is the sequence of events that Abdu'l-Baha is suggesting when you're talking about creation and creator, you should start with actually the rational arguments that we discussed regarding the building blocks of humanity and how species get created, with what permutation, which is specific permutation, not any permutation of those four building blocks yield a new species. And if you look at the mathematical process of possible permutation of these building blocks in the strand double helix of DNA, it's almost unlimited. So why certain permutation or combination creates life and some others don't. But whenever they do, it creates a complete species. That's the missing link. How come it doesn't create species that cannot survive? So you see there's a purpose of the creation itself, and it's built into the system itself. So whenever those combination occurs, that this certain species would show up. And then you go into, obviously, the spiritual argument. Any comments?
Yes, Gilbert, I have a bit of a reflection. I think that the audience that this presentation is addressing, obviously, is material philosophers, and presenting a spiritual argument to them is within the context of these quotes that you have. However, I think that they're, material philosophers, these very we live in a very diverse world, so there are lots of different ways. For example, if you presented this material to Indigenous people, which in America, with a population of 332 million people of diverse nations, predominantly Christian, at the moment there's 40 million who actually have left Christianity. But my point being this, that for me to attend this as an Indigenous person is a really big wake-up call in regards to having to learn a more material philosophical language in case I happen to be in a forum with material philosophers, because I think, that people, when I look at Abdu'l-Baha and the lives of the pioneers and their forbearance and what they had to do in order to get this message across, I think it's a very good thing to attend different forums, so to speak, to recognize our diversity. So, I find it very interesting. Thank you.
Sure. Actually, even indigenous people had their own messengers. So it wasn't that they were left alone. And they had actually culture that was far more advanced than the 18th century, where white man came and almost eradicated the indigenous people through diseases they brought with them. So,
but importantly, Gilbert, the fact is we do have our own knowledge. And what I'm saying is I've come from a position where I have visited your community and your presentations to educate myself in terms of the diversity that we have within the Baha'i community and the level, particularly in America. I found there's a trend in America, looking from afar and looking at what's happening, of a great upsurgence in regards to approaching various sectors of your community, especially Christianity, giving Wade Franson's presentation on things like, the Bible and so on and so forth. So my point being is I'm just really trying to reach out and congratulate the community in America for its new ways, because I can see from here that there's a form of arising to actually get out into the community among material philosophers. I've actually been attending Stanford and other universities virtually to look at what's going on in your country, and there is a whole change. It's like a counter-evolutionary process going on at the moment in your country, given the conditions it's in, and the fact that your country has been gifted by the manifestation of God. Abdu'l-Baha loved your country and knew its destiny, and so did the Guardian. So, my point saying to you, this is just feedback for your audience is that, you know, a change is happening. And I can see that, and not just from this presentation, but the effort that individual Baha'is in your country are making in terms of reaching out to and having a bigger, more embracing social discourse. So congratulations, and you're in my prayers. Thank you.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, when you see materialism is a religion by itself. So the question really is that because of the atrocities that has occurred through ecclesiastical system, especially in Christianity in the United States, last couple of decades, especially in Catholic priests and the atrocities they have occurred, people have divorced themselves from organized religion, but they still call themselves Christian, but they say we're spiritual and we don't really adhere to a religion. And this is really the backlash to the ecclesiastical structure that Baha'u'llah dismantled, basically. So this issue regarding class of clergy that was eliminated by the latest manifestation is source cause of all the evil in the world today, because those religions have turned into culture. They're no longer valid religions.
And Gilbert, what I was trying to say about this presentation too, about looking at nature and the evolutionary process of us becoming from, you know, a standing human being and so on and so forth, is that, you know, the reality of our faith too is in its evolutionary stages. And the other point that you have to realize is that Christianity was weaponized, and half the world's population that is recovering from post-colonial violence are my and many Indigenous people. And the greatest weapon that was used was Christianity to do that. So that's a, you know, that's, and people are looking at that and not the beauty of His Holiness Christ or His revelation or the reality of His teachings, but what those ministers and people who were greedy for power and other people's property made of Christianity in their own name, not in the name of His Holiness Christ. So, you know, I think there's a whole evolutionary change going on, and very particularly from a distance, looking at America, looking at your political, economic, societal current situation is critical. So these sessions that you're conducting, and it's not just you, it's Peter Terry, it's all the people on the ground in America who are rising up. Baha'is are rising up to actually struggle and to stand and arise to fight for truth in a society that's turned on its head. Thank you.
No, of course. Great. Any other comments? If not, we're going to go to the next slide. The appearance of the spirit and the mind in man. Very good question. We need a volunteer to read this.
Question. Did the mind and the spirit appear in the human species from the very beginning? Or were they manifested as humanity gradually developed, or only after its development had been perfected? Should I continue?
Yep.
Answer. The beginning of the formation of man on the terrestrial globe is like the formation of the human embryo in the womb of the mother. The embryo gradually grows and develops until it's born, and thereafter it continues to grow and develop until it reaches the stage of maturity. Although in infancy the signs of the mind and the spirit are already present in man, they do not appear in a state of perfection and remain incomplete. But when man attains maturity, the mind and the spirit manifest themselves in the utmost perfection.
Yeah, this is exactly what we were discussing, whether man was born as a man or it was gradually became a man. That means that the level of consciousness in an animal perfected to the point that now we can call that animal a man. So that doesn't exist. So here, again, it says, when did this appear? Now, what analogy Abdu'l-Baha is using is similar to formation of human embryo. Human embryo has a soul. It can feel pain. It can actually has consciousness, although not fully developed, but it's an embryo of a man. And as the embryo grows into developing limbs and eyes and ears and so on and so forth, and obviously that sense of the spirit or their soul becomes stronger, manifesting the actions that they can perform. So here again, it says the embryo gradually grows and develops until it's born. And thereafter, it continues to grow and develop until it reaches the stage of maturity. But even Abdu'l-Baha mentions, when you say prayers, or the mother that is pregnant reads prayer, it impacts even the fetus. That means that the soul of a man exists within that fetus. So this issue, again, this correlates back into abortion, that the soul of a man is infused or gets adjacent to the body at the time of conception. So that entity, the embryo, requires protection of basically laws. So here we're just discussing that man, when man was created on earth and manifests itself as a species, as a new species, it always had mind, cognitive capabilities, and a spirit. So it had a soul from the beginning. So this is really what the difference is. And here it says, although in infancy the signs of the mind and the spirit are already present in man, they do not appear in a state of perfection. But they do exist and remain incomplete. But when man attains maturity, the mind and the spirit manifest themselves in the utmost perfection. So when you're born and you get trained through the Holy Spirit or environment that you're growing up, you attain those perfections and attributes that is innate in you. So reality here, again, this description is that there was no, at one time, a species that had half of the soul of a man or only certain attributes of God. Man, when he was created on earth, had all the attributes and had a soul, and a perfect soul. And through the progression of growth, and of course through the Holy Spirit, his soul gets educated to the recognition of God and his messengers and the Holy Spirit that attributes to the perfection of those attributes through application of the Holy Spirit or writings or tablets or laws that God brings in for that period. So that's really gist of the talk here, is that there is no half human. When this species occurred, he was complete. As the other species that are born, they're complete. Any comments on this?
Well, I'm just really glad, Gilbert, we've cleared that up. And I just want to give a description of what we are as human beings. Man is the supreme talisman. Lack of a proper education hath, however, deprived him of that which he doth inherently possess. Through a word proceeding out of the mouth of God, he was called into being. By one word more, he was guided to recognize the source of his education. By yet another word, his station and destiny was safeguarded. So we have always been unique. We've never been animals. We have always been the supreme talisman, a gift of God to himself. Thank you.
Great. Looks like we have come to the end of this session. We need a volunteer to read the closing prayer. Arya, do you want to read one?
Sure.
Oh.
Thy name is my healing, O my God, and your remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearest to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art, thou bountiful, thou knowing, thou wise.
Thank you very much. Hopefully we see everyone next week, same time. Have a good night.
Thank you, Aria.
Thank you.